Well, hello, my friends, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is Pastor Calvin Corbett with the broadcast Hope for Your Heart, and this is a ministry of Hickory Ridge Community Church, and so glad that you are joining us today. Well, today I want to give you 5 ways to manage your money. I guess we could call this getting a grip on your finances. And so we're going to look at the subject of how can I manage my money. Now listen, somebody said this: if I don't learn to manage my money will manage me. I guess we could say that about all parts of our lives, right? If I don't learn to manage my mouth manages me. If I don't learn to manage my mind will manage me. You know, a number of years ago, there was a famous book that came out, and it was called The Joy of Cooking. And then later on, there was a book that was written, The Joy of Flying. Well, Solomon, who wrote the book of Proverbs, he was the wisest man that ever lived. He was also the wealthiest. And he wrote a book called Proverbs. Now, Proverbs are not books of promises. It's a book of principles. And it's a book that if you will follow the principles in this book, you discover that your life will be a whole lot better off. And so Solomon gives us 5 foundations in order to have financial freedom that are very simple to understand, okay? Let me give you 5 of them right now. And that way, if you missed the second part of the message, you still have these 5, okay? Number 1, keep good records. You got to know where your money's going in order to be a good manager of it. If you don't know where it's going, I guess it's kind of like a diet. If I don't know how much food I'm actually consuming, I won't be able to control my weight, because this is what it is when it comes to food. We tend to eat much more than we think we eat. Same with finances. We tend to spend much more than we think we spend, so we got to keep good records. Number 2, plan your spending. That's simply called a budget, okay? If I don't plan my spending will just take place, and I won't be able to track it. I won't be able to plan where I'm going to spend my money. And then number 3, save for the future. Realize that the future is going to come sooner rather than later, so be ready for the future. Don't worry about the future. Save for the future. And then number 4, enjoy what you already have. God has given us so many things to enjoy. And so many times we think, well, I'm only going to be happy when I buy the next car, the next house, the next whatever. Why don't you spend just a moment and say, Lord, thank you for what I already have. Enjoy the blessings that you have already. And then number 5, if you're going to have a grip on your finances, you've got to give back to God. Well, let's take these one at a time, okay? Number 1, keeping good records. This is what is called the principle of accounting. Proverbs 27:23 says, riches can disappear fast, so watch your business interests closely. Know the state of your flock. In those days, when Solomon was writing, pretty much everybody was a shepherd. And so flocks represented assets. So he's saying, know what you've got. You've got to keep track financially. You must be aware. You know, have you heard yourself say, well, I don't know where all my money goes? Then you're in trouble. You need to keep good records. Somebody once said, money used to talk. Now it just slips away. Well, Proverbs 23:23 says, get the facts at any price. You need to be realistic, and you need to know how you are really doing. You know, ignorance plus easy credit equals trouble. You need to know where your money is going. You need to keep good records. You need to know 4 things about keeping good records, okay? Here they are. Number 1 is, what do you owe? I was trying to help a young couple one time, and they had no idea how much debt they had. They were opening up new credit cards to pay for old credit card bills, and they were just paying one to keep up with the other. They had no idea how much they owed on their cars. They had no idea how much debt they had. They had no idea what they owed. As a result, it took a long time to even begin the process of getting them out of that debt, because they weren't even aware of how much debt they have. So number 1, you got to know what you owe. Number 2, you got to know what you own. Know the worth of the assets that you have. And from a very practical standpoint, in my personal life and in our church, we do not go into debt for anything that depreciates in value. And you say, well, it's too late for me. I've already bought groceries on my credit card. I'm paying for a vehicle on time on credit. And so when you know what you own, you know what's paid for. And I would encourage you to make that a principle of your life this day forward, that you will not go into debt for something that does not appreciate in value. Those things that depreciate in value, for example, a car. Dave Ramsey has a lot of good information about how to go through the process of buying a car. But I'm telling you, if you will do it wisely, you can actually pay cash for a car. It may not be a brand new car. It may be an old clunker. It might need a little work. And then you trade that car in for something that's worth a little more as you sell the other car and get enough money and keep building up that way. But know what you own. Know the assets that you have. And then number 3, know what you earn. Know how much income is coming in. Some people have no idea. It gets directly deposited in their account, and they have no idea how much they earn. Well, how are you going to budget if you don't know what you earn? And then know where it goes, number 4. All right, so you write it down, you keep a log, and you keep good records. You say, I don't have time to keep good records. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have time to worry about your finances? Obviously, you do, right? So take that time that you would be worrying about your finances and use that time to keep good records. You see, if you spend the time keeping good records that you spend worrying, you'd have a lot less worry and a whole lot more financial freedom. So number 1, keep good records. Number 2, plan your spending. This is what is called the principle of budgeting. Now, I want you to know that what I'm saying to you today is not new to me, and it's just good, solid financial advice. And I would encourage you to take a course like Financial Peace University. And some of the things that I'm sharing with you today, I've kind of borrowed from them, and they borrowed it from somebody else because there's really nothing new under the sun. But this is the principle of budgeting. Plan your spending. You have to set financial goals, and then you got to stick with them. Look what Proverbs 21:5 says, and this is the Good News translation. Plan carefully, and you have plenty. If you act too quickly, you never have enough. That other phrase there, act too quickly. This is talking about impulsive buying. The Good News translation says, stupid people spend their money as fast as they get it. You know, our church, we have been very blessed through the years. We've not really had a whole lot of contractors in all the building that we've done in the last 26 years. We've not had a whole lot of people take advantage of us financially, but we did have on one occasion, actually 2 occasions. On one occasion, somebody ripped us off with a sign, our church sign that's out front. And the reason that this contractor got in trouble, and I didn't know it at the time, he told me he was a Christian, and maybe I was a little naive, and so we gave him a deposit of half the cost, and then he got started on the job, but then all of a sudden the work stopped, and then I had trouble getting a hold of him, and wouldn't return my calls, and it went on for months and months and months, and then I found out what was happening. He was living out Proverbs 21:20, that says, stupid people spend their money as fast as they get it. And what he was doing is he took our deposit and was trying to use that money to complete another job. And the problem was when he finished that job, he didn't have any money left over to continue on our job, and he in essence was insolvent. As a matter of fact, we were going to pursue this matter legally, but our attorney says, listen, I've done some checking, and this guy is already incarcerated for not paying child support. And so stupid people spend their money as fast as they get it. There's an example of one who is spending their money as fast as they got it. They weren't setting it aside for its intended purposes. So make sure that you are planning your spending, that you are keeping good records. And then number 3, save for the future. The future is going to come. And I think about the future. They say that a particular county, I'm not sure what county this is, but people are living from paycheck to paycheck, and they're saving nothing for the future because they have everything they have, and they're putting everything into the present, and they're not planning for the future. So here's a simple way to save for the future. Dave Ramsey calls this the 80-10-10 plan, I believe. And I've practiced this for many years in my life. As a matter of fact, I've actually transitioned even more on the matter of savings and giving than I did when I started this plan. But to get started, The 80-10-10 plan is this. You live on 80% of your income. We'll just throw a figure out there, okay? Let's say you're making $1,000 a week. Instead of living on $1,000 a week, you're going to live on $800 a week. And you're going to set your budget that you're going to have $800 a week in which you can meet all of your bills. Now, I know this is going to be tough, but you got to be a little bit disciplined on this. And as you have your budget, you look at it and you say, okay, I've got $1,000 every week. I'm going to give $100 in giving to the church. I'm going to save $100 and I'm going to live on $800. Now, somebody says, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, the cost of living is always the same. It never really changes. The cost of living is always whatever you got. Now, I remember many years ago, I worked for a company, and this company was a manufacturer of crimp-on connectors and battery terminals and wire and cable ties and kind of electrical switches and that kind of stuff. And so they manufactured these items. And then this company one day decided to buy out another company that was much larger than they were. And it was going to be tight to be able to pull this off. But the owner of the company felt led to do this. He was a believer. And they went ahead and purchased this other company. And as they went through the process, they discovered that this company that was larger than the original company was also in debt and also was financially strapped. And it didn't come out in the full disclosure of the agreement. And so here we have these two companies that have merged together. One was small and strong, but one was big and weak. And now they both became weak, right? And as a result of that, we were in trouble. The company was in trouble. And I remember the sales managers all got together with all the sales rep, and we had a meeting. And the owner of the company says, now listen, guys, let me tell you what's happening. I'm going to be honest with you as to where we are as a company. And he says, as a result of where we find ourselves as a company, this is what we are proposing. We are proposing that everybody takes an across-the-board 20% cut. 20% cut on your wages, 20% cut on your commission, and across-the-board 20% cut on everything. And we're all listening, oh, great. We're going to lose a big chunk of our paychecks now. And he says, the other option, if you're not happy with that option, is that you will be immediately laid off. And you can apply for unemployment, but you'll be immediately laid off. Well, as I was in that room, not one person says, I'm going to take the layoff option. We all said, okay, this is for a year. And hopefully after the end of this year, things will change and things will turn around. And you know what we learned? We learned that we could live on 20% less income, especially if we had already been living on that 80% instead of 100%. You never know what's going to happen. As I think about inflation, where we are right now, the cost of things going up about 8.5% every single year. It's hard to stay ahead of that because wages are not going up 8.5% a year. So we've got to be saving for the future, being ready for the future, because you don't know what the future is going to hold. So you set some money aside for simple little things, okay? I think you ought to set aside $1,000 in an emergency fund. Not too long ago, I got home one afternoon and I walked into my garage and water's all over the floor. I was, oh, great. Something has happened. And I thought I had a burst pipe. And it turned out I had not a burst pipe, but I had a water heater that was leaking water profusely, right? And so thankfully we have a plumber in the church. I picked up the phone and it was about $600 to get this thing taken care of. And I was a little disappointed. I said, well, that water heater is about 20 some years old. I reckon I got my money's worth out of that. But thankfully I had the money set aside. So I wasn't like devastated, right? I didn't have to call somebody's church and say, hey, can you help a brother out? My water heater just blew up and I need some help. No, I had the money set aside in that emergency fund. Now, remember, the emergency fund is for emergencies, right? And an emergency is not, I got to have a pizza right now. That's not an emergency, right? An emergency is my water heater has blown up, or I need to replace something in my car because the water pump in the car has gone bad. Those are the things that you don't anticipate, but you know they're going to happen. So save for the future. Number 4, enjoy what you already have. Now, this is the principle of contentment. And so many times we miss this principle because we don't take the time to enjoy what we have because we're so working to pay for what we want to have. Proverbs 21:17 says, indulging in luxuries, wine and rich food will never make you wealthy. Now, this verse, I think, is violated all over the country. You know, we see something and we say, I got to have it, whether I need it or not, okay? And as you think about this, that is what you call setting yourself up for debt. And because we set ourselves up for debt, we cannot enjoy what we have. You see, when we think about the difference between contentment and complacency, I'm not talking about being complacent. I'm talking about being content. Lordship and laziness are not the same. You know, contentment means I'm enjoying what I have, not worrying about the things I don't have. It doesn't mean you don't have any goals or you don't have any ambitions. Of course, you want to have an ambition and desires for the future. But the Bible says to set goals. I'm not saying to be complacent or not try to better yourself. You ought to try to better yourself every day, socially, spiritually, economically. That's fine. But in the process, we need to learn to enjoy today. So many times we lose the joy of today because we're worried about tomorrow. Too many times we say, I'll be happy when. And we try to complete that sentence. I'll be happy when I have a new car. I'll be happy when I have a better house. I'll be happy when I have whatever. You fill in the blank. You know what you're saying? You're saying, I'm not content. We need to learn to be happy now. Oh, yes, we can still have the goals and the ambitions and desires, but we need to be happy right now. I remember when we were in the process of building our church. For 7 long years, we met at the Hickory Rotary Club. And I was kind of frustrated, you know, setting up and tearing down every weekend. And then we did it again on Wednesday night. And I was getting to the point where it's like, man, I just can't wait till we get into our new building. I can't wait till we get into a new building. And I was beginning to despise the Hickory Rotary Club because that's where we're meeting week after week after week. And somebody said, you know, Pastor, we're going to miss this old building when we leave it one day. We're going to miss the spirit that we have in this place. And why don't we just enjoy what we have right here? And thank the Lord for this building right here. Even though sometimes we got to go in there and we got to clean it out because it smells like a brewery in there and smells like a smoke factory in there. Even though we have to do all that, we are so thankful that we have a place to meet. You know, God began to work on my heart, and I started to give thanks for that Rotary Club building and thank the Lord that we had a place to meet, and at least we were protected from the rain, and the AC worked, and the heat worked, and we had a place to meet. Oh, it wasn't elaborate, but it was a place where we could gather as a church. And I learned, you know, the church is not a building anyway, and we build buildings, and I call them just warehouses to put people in. That's all they are. We gather together not to worship the building, but to worship the Lord. And if we don't learn contentment, we will never be able to experience God's peace. Hebrews 13:5 says, be content with what you have. You see, sometimes we're so busy getting more, we don't have time to enjoy what we already have. You see, if I'm so busy getting the newer or the bigger or the better, always moving up, I don't have time to enjoy what I've got. You've heard that expression, I want to give my kids quality time. Well, I kind of get that, and in a way, I kind of hate that phrase. But quality time, I bet if you went and asked your kids, would you rather have quality or quantity? Without a doubt, they're going to say, I want quantity. You don't always have to be doing something with them. They just want you around. You see, we can get so caught up in this syndrome of getting more, being overextended, that we don't enjoy what we have. You know, I think about my children. They're all grown now. We have one that is still home with us, and because of his condition, he'll always be with us. But the 4 older ones have all moved out, and they're all doing pretty good. And I'm so glad that when they were young, we invested in them, and we spent time with them. And many times we went without things because we refused to be a 2-income family at that time. When my wife and I got married in the early days of our marriage, we decided as a couple that we would not have both of us working, and we knew that we wanted to have children, and so we decided that as long as the children were not in school for the first 5 years of their lives, that Sherry would be home with them full-time, investing in them and being with them. And so because we had 5 kids, the first 20 years or so of our marriage, Sherry was a stay-at-home mom. and she helped with the church. It wasn't that she wasn't doing any work. She was busy, extremely busy with taking care of the house and taking care of the children and being involved in the church, but she didn't have a job that was creating revenue. But we made that sacrifice. We felt it was extremely important in those early formative years of our children that she be at home. So as a result, I worked 2 jobs to try to compensate for that and to be able to provide for our families. But God always came through. So learn contentment. Somebody uses this phrase that drives home the point of contentment. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. As you think about that, if you've decided that you're going to live debt-free, and I believe that the only debt we should carry is a mortgage on something that appreciates in value. If you're going to decide to live that way, you're going to have to use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. But you will discover that you experience so much freedom. You see, we decided we're going to learn to be content with what we have, and we're going to pay cash for everything except for our mortgage. So as you think about this, these principles are very simple. Now, they're hard to incorporate, but they're simple. Keep good records, plan your spending, save for the future, enjoy what you have, and then we've got one last point. Give at least 10% back to God. Now, remember I call this the 80-10-10 principle. Now, if you follow this principle, you're going to discover something. You're going to discover that if you follow this for a length of time, that you'll be able to actually increase what you save, increase what you give, and learn to live on less. I'd love to get to a point in my life where I can instead of living on 80%, live on just 10%, right? Instead of giving 10%, just live on 10%. Now, I don't know if I'm ever going to be there, but I'm now at the point where I'm able to give more than 10%, able to save more than 10% because we've learned to live on less. So the principle of giving 10% back to God, that should be the starting point. That's the principle of tithing. It's taught throughout the Bible, but especially in the book of Proverbs. Give at least 10% back to God. Look what Proverbs 3:9-10 says. Honor the Lord by giving him the first part, right? Not the leftovers, the first part of all of your income, and he will fill your barns to overflow. So the emphasis there is the first part of your income. Some people ask me, well, should I tithe on the net or should I tithe on the gross? I always say, well, what do you want God to bless, the net or the gross? If you want God to help you in your finances, if you want God to help you get out of debt, if you want God's blessing, then you're going to have to put him first. It's not pay all your bills and then at the end of the month, give a tip to God. I've discovered when I do that, it seems like there's no tip left for God. I want to encourage you to understand the blessedness of giving. You see, people get more uptight when I talk about money than anything else. I think the most sensitive nerve in the body has got to be that nerve that goes from the heart to the pocketbook. But God says, put me first. Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be brought into focus. Whenever I make the first 10%, I give it back to him first, out of gratitude for the fact that he's already blessed me. Proverbs 10:16 says, the good man's earnings advance the cause of righteousness. Now, is any of your money doing that? Proverbs 22:9 says, a generous man will have God's blessings. God is a giving God. When you're giving, you're becoming more like him. If you're not tithing, you're only cheating yourself. You're not hurting anybody else. You're only cheating yourself. So here are the 5 principles. Keep good records, plan your spending, save for the future, enjoy what you have, give God the first 10%. You see, that's God's foundation for financial freedom. I want to summarize what we said today with one verse. Isaiah 55:2. Now, this is the real issue on financial problems. Why spend money on what does not satisfy? You see, the main reason, the number one reason people go into debt is because they think things will satisfy. I want you to know only Jesus can satisfy. Isaiah 55:2, why spend money on what does not satisfy? God bless you. Thank you for tuning in today. If you'd like to hear this broadcast again, you can have a free download at buzzsprout.com/1890557, or you can listen on Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast.
Hickory Ridge Community Church is located at 3320 Battlefield Boulevard South in Chesapeake, Virginia. Sunday service times are 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. We'd love for you to join us. For more information, go to hrcc7.org. And remember, no matter what you're going through, in Jesus Christ there is always hope for your heart.